Marilyn Monroe didn't just surrender to a chemical chaos in a lonely bedroom. She was methodically erased by the very men who treated her like a sovereign toy. She was the world's ultimate obsession, a luminous icon of desire. Yet, to the Kennedy brothers, she was merely a flesh-and-blood distraction between national security meetings. Her greatest tragedy wasn't losing her beauty, it was discovering that in the halls of power, love is a lethal liability. Welcome to Society Noir. But before the official reports filed her demise under a predictable overdose, how did the most famous woman on Earth become a national security threat simply by wanting to be loved? Imagine being the secret shared between a president and an attorney general, only to realize you are the only one not protected by the family seal. Imagine whispering state secrets in bed sheets, unaware that those same secrets were building your own guillotine. The Kennedy dynasty didn't just rule America. They specialized in the hostile psychological takeover of anyone who dared to get too close. From the opulent, drug-fueled parties at Peter Lawford's beach house to the chilling surveillance tapes recorded by the CIA, this is a forensic autopsy of a political assassination disguised as a celebrity tragedy. Stay with us as we unspool the sickening truth behind Marilyn's final exit, a story where the most dangerous place in the world was in the arms of the most powerful men in history. To understand the fall, we must understand the asset. In Mutngin Chintrum Sarmihai, Marilyn Monroe was not just an actress, she was a biological gold mine. But to the elite, a gold mine is only valuable as long as it's easy to extract. To the Kennedy brothers, Marilyn was a recreational luxury, a high-end amenity that came with the office, much like the nuclear codes or the Air Force One. John F. Kennedy, the golden boy of American politics, possessed an appetite for conquest that matched his ambition. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a trophy that breathed. And Marilyn, with her desperate, childlike need for a father figure, walked right into the den of the world's most sophisticated predators. She thought she was being welcomed into Camelot. In reality, she was just being added to a long, classified inventory of disposable pleasures. The ultimate insult in this political theater wasn't the infidelity, it was the logistics. When the president grew bored of his sovereign toy, he didn't just discard her, he handed her down. Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, the man supposed to represent the law, became the secondary recipient of Marilyn's devotion. Think about the sheer, icy arrogance of that transaction. It wasn't a love triangle, it was a game of pass the parcel with a human soul. Bobby Kennedy, the ruthless crusader, found himself tangled in the same silk sheets as his brother. But while Marilyn saw a new savior, the brothers saw a shared problem. She was no longer just a mistress, she was a witness. She was a biological recording device of their darkest indiscretions, and her diary was becoming a ledger of political suicide. The Kennedys projected an image of Catholic virtue and family perfection, a shimmering mirage called Camelot. Marilyn was the glitch in the matrix. She was the surrogate mother of a scandal that could level the White House. As she grew more unstable, more demanding, and more addicted to the attention of the two most powerful men in the world, the machine began to hum. The CIA and the FBI weren't just watching her, they were cataloging her descent. Every sob, every drug-induced slur, and every whispered secret was a nail in her mahogany casket. She was a woman who lived for the spotlight, never realizing that the brightest lights are the ones used in interrogations. The men she loved weren't protectors. They were the architects of her isolation. By the summer of Mutngin Chintrum Saumehai, Marilyn Monroe had reached her expiration date in the eyes of the new frontier. She was calling the White House too often. She was threatening to hold press conferences. She was talking about red diaries and secrets shared in the afterglow of power. In the world of Society Noir, there is no room for hell hath no fury like a woman scorned when that woman has the home number of the Attorney General. The transition from icon to liability was instantaneous. The same men who once whispered sweet nothings into her ear were now discussing the most efficient way to silence the noise. The surrogate mother of the Kennedy secrets was about to be induced into a permanent sleep. In the world of the Motngin Chintrum Salmuis, privacy was a luxury Marilyn Monroe could no longer afford. Her Brentwood home wasn't a sanctuary, it was a high-tech laboratory for the CIA and the FBI. Imagine every sigh, every drug-induced confession, and every intimate whisper with Bobby Kennedy being captured on magnetic tape. This is the peak of society noir, where your bedroom becomes a courtroom and you're the only one who doesn't know you're on trial. The intelligence community didn't just watch Marilyn, they curated her breakdown. They knew she was spiraling long before she hit the ground, and they held the tapes like a loaded gun to her temple. For the Kennedys, she was a liability. For the shadow state, she was the ultimate leverage. Marilyn's most dangerous accessory wasn't her Chanel Numb. It was a small, red diary. In those pages, she scribbled the fragmented conversations of the men who ruled the world, talk of Fidel Castro, the mafia, and the nuclear brinkmanship of the Cold War. To Marilyn, these were secrets shared in love. To the Attorney General and the President, these were blueprints for their own execution. In the eyes of the establishment, she had committed the ultimate sin. She had stopped being a dumb blonde and started becoming an accidental historian. When an icon starts taking notes, the establishment starts taking aim. The Red Diary was more than a journal, it was a countdown clock. How do you destroy a woman who is loved by millions? You do it from the inside out. The campaign against Marilyn was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. The phone calls that were never returned. The accidental leaks to the press about her instability. The quiet whispers that she was difficult and unreliable. The Kennedy machine excelled at the art of the cold shoulder. They didn't just break up with her, they erased her existence while she was still breathing. Imagine the psychological whiplash of being the most desired woman on Earth one day and a national security threat to be avoided at all costs the next. It was a clinical, calculated isolation designed to push her toward the very chemicals that would eventually save the brothers from their scandal. The tragedy of Marilyn Monroe was that she was caught in a crossfire between the White House and the underworld. As Bobby Kennedy declared war on the mob looked for a way to strike back. And there she was, the shared plaything of the Attorney General and the enemies he was trying to imprison. The surveillance tapes at Peter Lawford's beach house weren't just for political blackmail, they were the currency of the criminal elite. Marilyn was the bridge between the boardroom and the back room, a bridge that both sides were willing to burn down to keep their secrets safe. She wasn't just a victim of a love affair, she was a casualty of a secret war where human life was the lowest priority on the ledger. By August, Motngin Chin Trum Sao Mi Hai, the noise from the Brentwood bungalow had become deafening for those in Washington. Marilyn was no longer a secret, she was a ticking bomb. The decision to intervene wasn't personal, it was institutional. In the logic of the new frontier, a single life, even one as bright as Marilyn's, was a small price to pay for the preservation of an empire. The architects of silence moved in with the precision of a surgical team. This wasn't a murder in the traditional sense, it was an administrative removal. They didn't need to pull a trigger, they just needed to ensure that when she reached for her comfort, no one was there to pull her back. They waited for the darkness to settle, knowing that the headlines the next morning would be much easier to manage than a woman who refused to stay silent. On the night of August born, Motngin Chin Trum Sao Mi Hai, the American dream didn't just die. It was quietly terminated in a Brentwood bungalow. Marilyn Monroe, the undisputed queen of the silver screen, took her final exit under a cloud of chemical chaos that smelled suspiciously like a political cleanup. She knew too much, she felt too much, and most importantly, she expected too much from men who viewed the world as a calculated transaction. The scene was a masterpiece of forensic theater. A locked door, an empty bottle of Nembutal, and a body positioned with the eerie precision of a window display. But in the world of society noir, the cleanest crime scenes are often the ones with the most blood on the invisible hands of the state. The overdose was a convenient period at the end of a sentence that the Kennedys were tired of reading. Before the coroner could even arrive, the vacuuming of Marilyn's life had begun. Witnesses reported men in dark suits, not doctors, not police, but fixers, moving through the house with surgical efficiency. Phone logs were scrubbed. The Red Diary vanished into the ether. The record of her final, desperate calls to the White House and the Department of Justice was redacted from history in real time. This wasn't an investigation, it was an extraction. The state was reclaiming its secrets from a woman who could no longer hold them. Imagine the chilling indifference of a machine that treats a human being's death as a data cleansing operation. They didn't just want her dead, they wanted her to have never spoken at all. The autopsy of Marilyn Monroe provided more questions than answers. The absence of pill residue in her stomach, the mysterious bruising, the conflicting timelines of the doctors and the housekeepers all pointed to a story that the official narrative refused to tell. But the establishment didn't care about the truth. They cared about the headline: probable suicide. 2 words that acted as a sedative for a grieving nation. By labeling her unstable, they neutralized her ghost. If she was crazy, her secrets were delusions. If she was a drug addict, her revelations were hallucinations. The Kennedy brothers didn't just survive the scandal. They used her death to bury it deeper than her casket. Marilyn had spent her life searching for a family, for a mother figure, for a place to belong. In her final months, she became the surrogate mother to the darkest impulses of the American century. She birthed their scandals, nursed their egos, and was ultimately consumed by their ambition. The tragedy of the surrogate mother is that she was never meant to survive the birth of the new frontier. The Kennedys represented a future that was too clean for a woman as messy as Marilyn. Her death was the ultimate act of political hygiene. She was the beautiful, tragic sacrifice on the altar of Camelot, a reminder that in the Game of Thrones, the queen is always the first piece to be sacrificed to protect the king. Today, Marilyn Monroe remains frozen in our collective memory, not as a woman, but as a brand. A neon-lit ghost, haunted by the shadows of 2 men who traded her love for power. We look at her smile and see the gloss, but society noir looks at the shadows and sees the stains. The Kennedy dynasty would eventually face its own tragedies, but the ghost of Brentwood would always be the first crack in the porcelain. Marilyn didn't die because of the pills. She died because she tried to be human in a world run by machines. And in the end, the most dangerous thing you can do in the halls of power is believe that the man whispering in your ear is actually listening to your heart.